Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Melissa. I am a registered dietitian, and here on my channel we talk about all things food and nutrition, and today we are talking about the Mediterranean diet. So I feel like this is one quote fad diet that pretty much everyone universally agrees is good. And it's really less of a diet, more of a way of eating. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Mediterranean diet, kind of the basics and the principles behind it. And yeah, so that's what we are going to do. So without further ado, let's get started. So the Mediterranean diet, as you could probably imagine, originated in the Mediterranean, around the Mediterranean basin, as they say. But basically it kind of dates back to prehistoric everything. Greek, Roman, Persian, Babylon, all that sort of stuff you learn about in history class. That is kind of where this diet originates. You know, that area had very rich soil, people were fishing, living off the land, and that is really kind of where the foundation of the Mediterranean diet comes from. Of course, as the world progressed, it's obviously changed a little bit, but really the basics kind of come from the diet of those people back then and the diet of those people now. You know, their diet has become more modern, and I'm sure there's processed stuff thrown in there, but not nearly as much as we Americans have changed our diet. So the person who is first credited with realizing the nutritional benefits of the Mediterranean diet is good old Ancel Keys. If you are a dietitian or have been to a nutrition class at all, you've probably heard of Ancel Keys. Like I said, he is the first one who kind of realized the benefits of the Mediterranean diet and started studying it. And it basically came about because he realized that poor people in Italy were actually healthier than rich people in New York. So he wanted to look at that and see why that was. And he ended up doing the 7-country study where he compared the lifestyle, the food and nutrition, and the cardiovascular disease in these 7 countries, and found that the countries who ate Mediterranean style had significantly less incidence of cardiovascular disease. Sorry if you hear weird sounds, my dogs are playing. And since then, hundreds and hundreds of studies have been done that show the Mediterranean diet's benefits. So decreased cardiovascular disease, increased HDL, decreased blood pressure, and decreased triglycerides are some of the benefits that are shown very often in these studies. So what is the Mediterranean diet? What are the principles of the Mediterranean diet? As I've said, think, you know, Greece, Italy, those sorts of places, and think about what they eat. So it's pretty much lots of whole grains, lots of fruits and vegetables, legumes, lots of fish, eggs, and then moderate meat, wine, and oil consumption. So if we break down the recommendations of the Mediterranean diet, it's recommended that you get 55 to 60% of your calories from carbohydrates, and about 80% of that should be complex carbs, so whole grains. About 10 to 15% of your calories should come from protein, and about 60% of that should be animal protein, with most of that coming from fish and white meat. And then 25 to 30% of your calories should come from fat. Again, most of that should be coming from unsaturated fats like oils, avocados, fatty fish, and things of that nature. So there is a website called Old Ways that is all about the Mediterranean diet, and they created the Mediterranean diet food pyramid. So I'm just gonna put the Mediterranean diet food pyramid versus the traditional food pyramid, which of course we don't use anymore, but then you can just kind of see the difference. So if you look at the difference between these two, the first thing that stands out to me is a big section of the Mediterranean plan is physical activity, which isn't really discussed a lot or at all in the traditional food pyramid. So, you know, all of these studies and everyone who promotes the Mediterranean diet makes sure to emphasize that only eating the Mediterranean diet isn't necessarily going to make all these health benefits happen. Physical activity is a big part of that as well. And if you think back to, historic times or even currently, people in those countries are a lot more physically active than we Americans are. They're walking to work. They are, excuse me. My dog just walked into the room with a spatula in his mouth. Brody, you jerk. So these people are walking to work. They're doing physically hard jobs, whereas we are doing a lot of sitting at desks and riding in cars. So physical activity and increasing physical activity is a big part of the Mediterranean diet. Also, in the traditional food guide pyramid, there really is no guidance or recommendations in terms of type of meat or even types of fat, whereas in the Mediterranean one, you can see that there's tons of fish on there, there is olive oil on there, and they're really emphasizing those unsaturated fats. And in the Mediterranean one, there's not an entire section devoted to dairy, which there is in the food guide pyramid. And also whole grains are emphasized way more on the Mediterranean pyramid, whereas, you kind of just see carbs or grains as a category in the traditional. So that's kind of the basics of the Mediterranean diet and the difference between a traditional diet and the Mediterranean diet. And then I just want to finish by giving you a couple steps on how to get started if you do feel like you want to start eating a little more Mediterranean style. So my first recommendation is to just add vegetables. Even if you don't want to change anything else about your diet right now, adding lots of vegetables into your diet is going to give you so many health benefits. And it's a huge part of the Mediterranean diet as well. My second recommendation is to use good fats. So just be conscious of what kinds of fats you're cooking with, what kinds of fats you're eating. Go for things like olive oil or avocado oil over things like vegetable oil, canola oil, even just like Pam spray. Instead, just drizzle some olive oil in a pan, So making those swaps to the good fats where you can. Another thing that you can add in, just every once in a while, maybe even just once a week, is seafood, especially those fatty fish like salmon and tuna. So maybe one night a week have salmon for dinner. That's a great way to kind of transition yourself into that Mediterranean style of eating. And then finally, any type of grains that you're eating, whether it be rice or bread or what have you, try your best to switch as much of that as you can over to whole grains. There's going to be so many more health benefits to even a whole grain pasta and its white, extremely processed alternative. So those are just a few steps to kind of get you going with Mediterranean style of eating. And after listening to this, hopefully you can kind of see, I make a lot of videos about fad diets here on my channel and the science behind them. Do they work? Do they not? Normally my conclusion is that it's not a sustainable way of eating and I wouldn't really recommend anyone eat that way. And I think you can kind of see the difference between the Mediterranean diet and these other diets. First of all, there's no end date in the terms of the Mediterranean diet, where things like Whole30 and diets like that, you're on this diet for a set amount of time and you're just going to stop eating that way afterwards. It's not like that with the Mediterranean plan. You're also not cutting anything out. A ton of these diets eliminate entire food groups, and anything that eliminates an entire food group is not going to be a sustainable way of eating. So those are kind of some major differences between something like the Mediterranean plan that has tons of science to back it up, that shows the health benefits, and a fad diet which does not and is not a sustainable way of eating. So hopefully that kind of convinces you a little bit to maybe try eating a little more Mediterranean style rather than just jumping into one of those fad diets. Okay, well that is all that I have today. I hope that you learned something and I hope that you enjoyed this. If you have any questions about the Mediterranean plan or any other types of fad diets that you want me to cover, then please put them below in the comment section and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you next week. Bye.